Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel JEET Academy. In this particular video, we'll be discussing about the inequalities. All right, now we have understood how to solve the equations, right? So let's talk about the inequalities. To begin with, let me discuss what are the symbols which we have for inequalities. So what are these symbols? This stands for greater than, this is for lesser than, then we have greater than equal to, and then we have lesser than or equal to, right? So these are the four symbols which we'll be discussing in inequalities, and this is one of the most challenging topics as well. Okay, most of the students, they struggle with this. So majorly, like suppose you end up writing k squared minus 9 is less than or equal to 0, then how do you solve for k, isn't it? So this is the fundamental question. So I'll be discussing the concepts of inequality. So stay tuned with this video and watch it till the end. Okay, and do comment if you like this concept or not. Okay, so to begin with, let me consider a general scenario which says that if I have, let's say, for example, x minus 2 multiplied by x minus 3 is lesser than 0. All right, now how do we solve for this? Okay, so first thing is to find the roots, or you can find the zeros. So individual factors, these are called as individual factors. So what I can do is I get the zeros by equating it to 0 from these individual factors. So I know that if I equate this to 0, what I get, I'll get x equal to 2. And if I equate x minus 3 to 0, what do I get? I'll get x equal to 3, right? Now the next thing is to put this on the number line. So this is how a number line would look. And therefore, you put it on the number line. So 2 lies here and 3 over here. Okay. Now, how do I know which region is positive and which region is basically negative? So for that, what you need to do is just concentrate on this first factor. Okay, x minus 3. Right. So now see, when you take a number which is greater than 3, okay, let's suppose 4. So if you plug in 4 over here, 4 minus 3, what it will be? It will be positive 1, right? So anything greater than 3, what will be the sign of x minus 3? Wouldn't it be positive over here? Yes. So what I'll do, I'll write positive over here. Okay. What about between 2 and 3? Let's suppose if I take 2.5. Okay. So if I take 2.5, so 2.5 minus 3 will eventually give me negative 0.5. So what is negative 0.5? Isn't it negative? Right. So I'll put a negative sign over here. So let's put a minus. Okay. Now something lesser than 2, you can take any value. Let's suppose if I take 1. So if I choose 1 from here and plug in 1 minus 3, I'll basically get it as negative, isn't it? So here also I'll put the same sign, which is basically negative, isn't it? I'm just talking about x minus 3 sign, okay, of this x minus 3. So now we are done with x minus 3. Now let's see the sign of x minus 2. So let me take a different color. So I have now x minus 2. Okay. Now let's discuss the signs of x minus 2. Right? I'm talking about the sign of this individual factor, which is x minus 2. So if I take more than 3, okay, let's say 4. So what will be 4 minus 2? That will be positive 2. So what is the sign of this? That's positive. Okay. Now take anything between 2 and 3. So if I take 2.5, so 2.5 minus 2 is how much? That's 0.5. So that's positive over here, isn't it? 2.5 minus 2 is basically 0.5, which is positive. So I'll put the sign of x minus 2, only x minus 2, that is positive. Okay, now come on to the number lesser than 2. So take a random number which is lesser than 2. So if I plug in 1, so what's 1 minus 2? That is negative 1. So it's negative over here, isn't it? So now what I'll do, I'll just write the sign of this, which is basically negative. Now I need a product of these two, isn't it? I need a product of x minus 2 times x minus 3. So what is the product? So we'll multiply these two and write it over here. So plus times plus is plus, positive times negative is negative, and negative times negative is positive. So let me write it over here. This becomes positive, right? Multiplying positive times negative is negative, and negative times negative is also positive, right? Now, what is the inequality? It's strict inequality which says lesser than 0. The product of these two, x minus 2 and x minus 3, should be lesser than 0, isn't it? So what happens? We get positive over here, negative here, and positive over here. So what will be my solution? Where is it negative? Lesser than 0 means negative. So it's negative between what? 2 and 3, right? So what will be my final answer? How do I conclude this? By writing x belongs from 2 to 3, isn't it? Or in inequality form, you could write x is greater than 2 and it is lesser than 3. Got it? Right. So this is the concept behind this. Now let us see one more concept, how I can explain this using the powers of the factors. Okay, there is one more simple concept. So let's switch to that. Okay. So now let's take the same example over here. X minus 2 times x minus 3 lesser than or equal to 0, right? This time equal to is also there. So what is the first thing we have to do? Put a number line, get the zeros out of these two factors. So that is 2 and that is 3, isn't it? Now what I'm going to teach you is the next concept, which is called as wavy curve. Okay, wavy curve method, which says greater than 3, right? So the catch over here is you have to keep in mind one thing, that is the coefficient of x is positive, right? When is this possible? When do we apply this wavy curve method? Provided the coefficient of x is greater than 0. Okay, basically it should be positive. So let me put it like this, is positive. All right, always. Otherwise, you cannot apply this. Now, once you know that the coefficient of x is positive, like for example here, it's positive and positive. So how do you start the sign? The sign of x minus 2 and the sign of x minus 3. So the product of these two, you start with the rightmost side, you put a plus sign, and then you put a negative sign, and then you put a positive sign. So alternate sign change. Okay. So now, how do you write the final answer? X is greater than 2 and lesser than 3. But what happens at 2 and 3? It is equal to 0, and that is given over here. So these two are included. So I'll write this. Okay. So this time, this is the solution. And I hope you understood the wavy curve method. So we always start with the positive sign, and then we change the signs alternatively. Okay. So positive, negative, positive. Okay. Now let's see the next scenario when we have, let's suppose, x minus 2 and x minus 3 whole square lesser than 0. Now there is a square over here. Okay. So again, we'll follow the same logic. Draw a number line and now put the roots. So the roots are 2 and 3. So we put them over here. And now here we see that there is x minus 3 whole square, isn't it? So we start with positive. Now at x minus 3, okay, when it is between 2 and 3, should it be positive? Should I write positive or negative? That is the question. Okay, I have to follow because the coefficient of x is positive, so I can follow wavy curve. So how do I know whether it is positive or negative? So let's learn that concept. So the concept over here is, let me take a different color. Let's suppose you have y is equal to x minus 3 whole square. So we know that it's a parabola which is opening upwards, isn't it? Like this. It's a parabola which is opening upwards. And if I draw the graph of this, if I plot it on the graph, so the curve would simply look something sort of this. Like this, opening upwards, right? And this point is basically 3, 0, right? So let me put it here. This is 3, 0, because at 3 it is 0. 3 minus 3 is 0. Now what we see over here is when the root is 3, and I can write it as even power, right? X minus 3 whole square. What happens to this graph? Isn't it always above the x-axis? That's x-axis. And this graph is basically always above the x-axis. Basically, it touches over here at this root. So whenever the power is 2, the graph touches the x-axis and it is never negative. So can I say in the vicinity of this root, which is 3, the graph stays positive and positive, right? So across this root, which is 3, what is the sign of the graph? It's positive over here and it's positive over here. So the sign remains same whenever the power is even. right? So this is what the concept we have learned, right? So you could apply the same concept which we had done with this x minus 2 and x minus 3. If I draw the graph of this function, so eventually it will look something like this. So the graph is at 2 and 3, it will cross it. So let me draw the graph like this. So this is the graph. And since the coefficient of x is positive, right? So it will be a parabola opening upwards. We know that if a is positive, it will be a smiley curve, right? The parabola will be facing or it will be opening upwards. So now you see across 2. So here it is positive and here it is negative. So across 2, what happens? There is a sign change of the function. So on the left hand side of 2, it's positive. On the right hand side, it's negative. Similarly, 3. On the right hand side of 3, it's positive. On the left hand side of 3, it's negative, right? And therefore, we change the sign over here. In the previous question, we had seen, right? When the power is 1. Are you getting this concept? Okay. So I hope it is clear to you. And now you could answer this question that whether it will be positive or negative. So what we have learned so far, that when the power is 2 over here, right? When the power is 2, so the sign will remain same. So I should write here plus. Okay. So therefore it becomes plus. Now we look for x minus 2. Term 2 comes from which factor? X minus 2. What is the power over here? That's 1. So if the factor has odd power, the sign will change. It will become x minus 2. Okay. And therefore, what is my final answer? X should be lesser than 2. Why it is not equal to? Because at x equal to 2, the function becomes equal to 0 and we have the strict inequality. Okay. So that's my answer for this question. I hope the concept of inequality is clear to you. Okay. Thanks for watching. Do share with your friends as well. Thank you.